Welcome everyone to this final evening of our UK and European online retreat. Welcome to everybody around Europe and from the USA and around the world. I'm seeing everybody fill up the seats in the Zendo, and it'll happen again later, but just much appreciation to Jessica and Kim for hosting all of these evenings and opening the doors and facilitating the smooth flow of inquiry. Thank you so much. Some of you may be wondering why this is called the Just This retreat, when in the UK we have the four nothings. So some time ago, in discussion with Flint, we decided that we would collectively call the UK sangha Just This, and we're in the process of creating the content for a website for Just This. And we felt that it expressed Flint's teaching and brought together the four sanghas and the expression of the teaching of the four sanghas. And it comes from a koan, an old ancestor story from China. I think it's the 8th century. And Dongshan, one of the very famous teachers in our lineage, was taking leave of his teacher Yunyan after training with him for many, many years. And he said, later on, if I am asked to describe your teachings, what should I tell people? And Yunyan looked at him and said, just this is it, just this. And I may refer to it a little bit more later on in my talk, but we will be talking about it and sharing it more in the summer months. So it's just to give you the first kind of flavor of what the koan and Just This refers to in the context of the UK sanghas. So I'm now going to hand over to Flint for this evening's Dharma talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. And Josh will be actually joining me, as others have over this time, and offering some words a bit later on. Let's begin, as we have also, with our verse before the Dharma talk. And I'd like this time to chant it only once, because in the spirit of our time together, I'm going to add one additional thing for you this morning as we begin. Our chant together: the Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. I want to add just a small note as we begin. And I asked the attendees, all of you, if this was Mother's Day in the UK, and I understand that it's in mid-March, rather than today in the United States as it is here. It's interesting that your Mother's Day in the UK came right as the pandemic, just about at the same time. And we've spoken thus far through the first 3 days a lot about the energy of the moon. We have told stories of the female ancestors, and we've had 3 of our wonderful women from the UK, from our early on sangha in Sheffield, then in the north in Lancaster, and then in the south in Sussex. Women have spoken. So I wanted to just speak something about mothers for a moment. In classical Soto Zen liturgy, in the way that I was trained in temples and monasteries, our services in the morning have a bit of a length to them. And one of the early things that's chanted is something called Hymn to the Perfection of Wisdom. It's very short. It's not the kind of hymn that you might have in church, but it's quite potent. The Prajna Paramita Sutras, the Sutras of the Perfection of Wisdom, are often called the Sutras of the Great Mother. We know that the Bodhisattva of wisdom is Manjushri and often is shown as a boy or a man with a sword. But the ground of being out of which this wisdom comes is actually the Great Mother. And I will send you a copy of this, and I only want to speak it once just so you can hear the beauty of it, because it also speaks to light, as in the moon, which we've spoken about earlier. Here's what we would have chanted, and I'll just read it to you. The Hymn to the Perfection of Wisdom. Homage to the perfection of wisdom, the lovely, the holy. The perfection of wisdom gives light. Unstained, the entire world cannot stain her. She is the source of light, and from everyone in the triple world she removes darkness. Most excellent are her works. She brings light so that all fear and distress may be forsaken, and disperses the gloom and darkness of delusion. She herself is an organ of vision. She has a clear knowledge of the own being of all dharmas, for she does not stray away from it. The perfection of wisdom of the Buddhas sets in motion the wheel of Dharma. The perfection of wisdom of the Buddhas, the mother of all the Buddhas, sets in motion the wheel of the Dharma. Wouldn't it be nice if we could bring light so that all fear and distress might be forsaken, and to disperse the gloom and darkness of delusion during this pandemic? So you can see it's a lovely verse, isn't it? And these are just a few words. She herself is an organ of vision. She is the source of light. From everyone she removes darkness. These are motherly, grandmotherly, powerful, potent images of the very foundation of wisdom. And of course, it's important that this wisdom be embodied. And I think the female imagery is so important because it suggests and requires embodiment. A mother is the embodiment of new life. Here's a small reflection from a 12-year-old girl. It was sent to me by one of our sangha members, translated from the Croatian in which it was originally written. The 12-year-old says, "I see birds flying in the sky, bumblebees working hard, horses grazing green grass. I hear the chirping birds and the sound of a small brook nearby. I hear a light wind greeting the leaves of the vine. When I feel the grass under my fingers and smell the nature all around me, I feel tranquil, happy, as if nothing bad can happen. At that moment, I think everything is perfect." It's a note of a beautiful wisdom from a 12-year-old. She said, "I see, I hear, I feel, I smell." She uses the language of our senses, of embodied immediacy. At that moment, I think everything is perfect. And what she draws on is her embodiment, the immediacy of the moment. And the key to perfection, remember Prajna Paramita, the perfection of wisdom, is through practice. Our embodied immediacy is the key to our practice, which she's speaking about, which opens to this perfection, which has nothing to do with everything being as we would like it to be, or as we would approve of, but the perfection of each thing as it is. We entered this retreat by celebrating our head student in Lancaster, Trudy Johnson, and receiving her beautiful teachings and poetry in response to the story of Mugai Nyudaim, her failing bamboo bucket, and the moon. So Trudy offered us the embodiment of broken perfection. We heard an amazingly heartfelt and vulnerable reflection on fear, wholeheartedness, and vow from Catherine Ellis, who's slowly moving and evolving into the head student role in Sheffield. She was the embodiment of yes in response to uncertainty and the inevitability of imperfection. The theme, welcome everything and push away nothing, was echoed in teachings about interdependence, the whole universe, everything in it being one, cooperative, as Buddhadasa said in his teaching given to us by Robert Aiken Roshi. We named the gap between suffering and freedom when we spoke about the two perspectives. This isn't it versus life as it is. And the strategies that go with them. I would like to solve my life, or I want to be free to live this shared life. And Josh will say more about this, I'm sure, when he speaks about just this. We placed compassion at the center of things, not as a skill we develop or a commodity we deliver, but a commitment to liberate the freedom and intimacy inherent in each moment, in each relationship, through our embodiment, through the embodied immediacy. We invited what is often pushed away, the willingness to fall and fail together, and to see what happens when we do. Another of our women, Francesca Diepschlag, after years of guiding the small sangha in Sussex, offered us a garden of delights and exquisite teachings on presence, mindfulness, and opening her heart to the world. She was the embodiment of reverence for life and the beauty inherent in all things. Each question and dialogue, each inquiry meeting through the week revealed the centrality of the truth of these teachings better than any of our Dharma talks. As people came forward with such courage and sincerity, each person has been the embodiment of fleshy, vulnerable, inspirational Buddhas. This is how we enter deeply the prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom. I want to speak just a bit about what we call the two truths, the relative, the absolute, how through our bodies we understand the mundane and the sublime, the everyday and the boundless nature of things, all one thing, but through our dualistic mind seeing in two ways. And I'd like to speak about this not in terms of Buddhist philosophy, because it can get rather heavy-handed, or even classical Dharma, but how these things manifest in an integrated, intensive, like we're engaged in, how we're practicing prajnaparamita, the deepest wisdom of the Buddha, while being home, even in isolation sometimes, and going about our daily life as our temple practice. There's a beautiful presentation by the Zen master Hakuin from the 18th century. And once again, I'll send this bit to you. This is how he said it. So this is a beautiful capping note to our retreat. He said, make your upper garments into a monk's robe. Make your chair your sitting cushion. Make the mountains, rivers, and great earth the sitting platform. Make the whole universe your own personal meditation cave. This is the true practice of the sages of the past and of today. So he's inviting us to make our life the same foundation, the same expression, the same pathway of practice as all the sages of the past, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time, as Catherine pointed out. And how do we make these things sacred or transformational? This is through our willingness, our choices, through the forms that we engage in, and certainly our perseverance through it all. We have to be willing, or we never enter the Dharma gate. We have to keep choosing our life over and over and over. We engage forms because it's the way we train, not because they in themselves are sacred, because they're training. And then perseverance, to continue and to continue. And then at the end of the day, to just live our lives in an ordinary way. One of the great Zen teachers of the 20th century, Soen Roshi, that first generation of Japanese teachers who came to the West, he was at Ryutaku Monastery in Japan, and a story he would tell about, it was attributed to a 19th century swordsman master in Japan, Yamaoka Teishu. He would say, Zen is like soap. First you wash with it, then you wash off the soap. And so our final day of retreat, we're still washing, but remember to let it go. It doesn't mean push it away. It doesn't mean forget it. Don't worry about it being Zen. Live your life. We're training, practicing, supporting each other to become wide enough and deep enough as containers for welcoming everything and pushing everything away. There's more I could say about these two things, but I think that I might ask Josh to come forward in just a moment. I'll just say a few more things. I want to say something about this edge between psychological and spiritual, because it's the same edge as we live in an embodied way between the relative and the absolute. When they're the same thing in a way. When we walk down into the everyday world from some lofty perspective of the absolute, or when we have some opening, we turn to face the challenges and difficulties of our everyday life without seeking the solace of emptiness, as if we could get out of things. We inevitably run into the things we like or dislike, things we fear. So our job is to welcome everything and to push nothing away as we settle into our lives from our retreat. And this is where the hazy distinction between psychotherapy and transformational spiritual practices arises all the time. We might be called to simply kind of slog through the conditioning and history we carry in our bodies so we can be free of those burdens. And we can also learn to see that the burdens and the experiences which have shaped us as the very causes and conditions of our awakening, the mud for the lotus of our awakening. Both are essential. This is my point I want to make. Endarkenment and enlightenment are both required. Enlightenment, the realization, the opening, the illumination of what we haven't seen before. Just this. And endarkenment, the plunging into the depths of our embodiment and our muddy, difficult, messy realities, the relative and the absolute, the mud and the lotus. And these offer two ditches where we can get lost. And this is the point I hope to make. There's the emptiness ditch, where essentially the attitude is, I've had some awakening, I've had some freedom, I've had a bit of a samadhi or opening. So it's all empty. Why should we be so concerned? We can step into a place of seeming freedom, but it's a ditch. We don't step out of anything. It's a classical spiritual bypass that can lead to dissociation, repression, suppression, a turning away from what needs your attention, what needs all of our attention. Because these things are, because things are empty of an independent existence, we can turn toward them, welcome them, and not resort to pushing away. An old Tibetan teacher once said, don't invite the future. Don't prolong the past. Don't fear appearances, and don't disturb your innate wakefulness. Be here now. Welcome everything. Push nothing away. You can't get out of anything through awakening. You can move through anything. It makes things possible, as Catherine said the other day. That's the emptiness ditch. The form ditch, or they would call it ego in the past, I think that's not a great word, is saying, what do you mean I should let go of my pain? I had a terrible childhood. It was traumatic. And you're saying I shouldn't feel these things? This can be a kind of a slippery victimhood, which embeds us in the relative positions that we occupy in our internal and relational dramas that we keep playing out. Of course, these things need attention. We must practice with them. But we do not need to continue practicing them. Proving that things were bad and difficult only proves that it was bad over and over again. And we can argue for it, and then we'll have it. But being understood deeply and met profoundly, which is usually what was missing, allows what was bad or difficult or traumatic to transform into everyday human grief and relief over time. This is the wisdom of Prajnaparamita, that we can actually transform and open so that the pain flows as life instead of locked as a position. All children should be protected and nurtured as they grow up, of course, but it doesn't always go that way. And even as adults, we need the same qualities of kindness and care, but there is a difference. As adults, we have to be responsible to ourselves and for ourselves in a very different way. We're not truly dependent on others when we're emotionally dependent on others in the same way we were when we were children. We have to make a firm commitment to care for ourselves, to be responsible for ourselves, no matter what. Not, I'll be responsible for myself and be a grown-up as long as it goes a certain way. As long as there's no pandemic, as long as the politics are my way, as long as my father doesn't die, and on and on and on. We have to keep making a choice to be self-responsible to ourselves, but realizing ourselves, of course, is everyone, not just this one. And an intensive retreat, whether it's a residential one or an integrated one like this, mimics this challenge. Because we're not cared for like a child in this situation. We're asked to rest in the awareness that we're held in a profound way by the sangha. And we're cared for in a clear and potent way by the schedule and the forms, and that's what's offered. And we're held imperfectly by each other, by the dedication of our teachers and our spiritual friends. But within that container, all of our personal preferences are gently removed, frustrated, revealed. Remember, compassion is not consolation. And the contract that we make in a retreat is that we will surrender or set aside our preferences for a while and open to the schedule and to the work that's necessary to sustain the retreat, the practices, the teachings. It's another way of saying I welcome everything and push nothing away. And so we check our preferences at the door or at the screen these days as we click. Not as being passive, but as being wakeful, ready, with energy, patience, and flexibility to meet life as it is. To choose our life over and over and over. And if we're fortunate, and many of you in inquiry and personally are telling me that you are very grateful that some of these places where you've clung to in order to maintain your self-centered dream self has begun to soften and even drop away. And what's revealed is a freedom that you never thought possible, a liberation from the tyranny of your personhood. And as we sit and turn toward serving others, we choose our life and settle into the life as it is. So I know these are harder teachings in some ways, but I thought it was worthwhile to make sure we spoke of this clear and powerful piece around prajna, because it's the sort of infinite compassion of the mother and also the sort of Manjushri together. Please, Josh, will you join us and offer your words today?
As many of you will be aware, I was to receive a formal entrustment this week as a teacher of Zen practice, and because of the pandemic, it hasn't been possible. But when I realized that it actually wasn't going to happen, it gave me an opportunity to go deeper into what entrustment might be, and also deeper into the teacher-student relationship. I did have a curative fantasy that by early May I would need to be a much better person than I am, and much more knowledgeable, and all of those things. And as entrustment approached, I realized that wasn't going to be possible. So tonight I want to talk to you about entrustment and love, and the mystery and wonder of the teacher-student relationship. And the first thought I have is that all life is entrustment. The big entrustment is being born and having this precious life entrusted to us, and the one we're given since all the others are taken, and how we move through our life with all of those gifts and concerns and troubles and everything. It's the big entrustment. And I'm sure during the day you will have had in your homes small entrustments, children, chores, bills to pay. Entrustment is just going on pretty much all the time. And sometimes it's lovely to be, entrusted with something. There's a lot of research that, for example, in care homes, if people have a little patch of ground to care for, or an animal, their health improves. So life is an invitation to entrustment. I don't know about you, but from time to time I need to hear a very simple explanation of what Zen practice is. So I sort of want to reset myself and hear, please tell me the story again so I can understand it. And I go to certain talks. I go to some of Flint's talks, and for a couple of weeks now, I've been fortunate to find a couple of talks which have really struck me about being entrusted as a teacher. And one of them is by Jikusho Kwong Roshi, who was Bill Kwong in the 60s. And he was a student of Suzuki Roshi. And there's a lovely video where he talks about Suzuki Roshi for about 10 minutes. And it's a wonderful expression of love. He doesn't say what Suzuki Roshi taught him, but he talks about him and he reminisces. But in his 80-year-old self, you can see what a life of practice has wrought in him. And he said, my teacher had died, and I was put in this position because of my love for him. I didn't want to let him down. And when I was feeling complicated about what a teacher-student relationship is, that was an enormous kind of relief. It's like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. It was like I kind of reset me back to zero. And it's a little bit like a child's bedtime story. I like going back to that sometimes and just hearing him talk about it. And the other one that I read almost immediately after I realized I wasn't going to receive entrustment was Suzuki Roshi, who was Jikusho Kwong Roshi's teacher. And he was talking about Dogen Zenji, 13th century monk who is very loved and respected in our lineage. And he said, Dogen Zenji was a monk who wanted to be a sincere disciple of the Buddha. That's all. That's it. And then he said his practice was how to be a good disciple from the bottom of his heart and mind. To have this spirit is the most important point. And again, it somehow settles something in my busy mind, because love is an endless practice, and it opens a way to engaging with myself and with my teacher, and just holding that in all I do. But it would be easy to miss that in the book that this comes from, Not Always So, is that Suzuki Roshi isn't merely referencing Dogen Zenji, which he does. He refers to him a lot of times. He's bringing them into his heart, so we can feel Dogen Zenji's practice. So he's crossing 8 centuries of time to bring Dogen into his presence. And when you hear Flint talk about his teacher Blanche and Mel, and talking about other teachers like Aitken Roshi on Friday, he doesn't reference them just to make a point. There's always enormous respect and care and love in how teachers talk about their teachers and people they've met on the path. And I think sometimes we kind of miss that in listening to what they said. We miss the whole kind of piece. I was struck today, this is the book that the piece about Dogen Zenji comes from, Not Always So. And the introduction's written by Ed Brown, and it's the first 3 words about Suzuki Roshi is always with you, always with you. And I referred to the koan, the ancestor story, earlier on, the Just This. And after Dongshan has asked Yunyan, to kind of encapsulate his teaching, and Yunyan says, just this is it. Dongshan is taking his leave, and of course there was no Zoom or internet or mobile phones in China in the 8th century. And Yunyan, his teacher, says, I won't see you again. He's wishing him well. And Dongshan says, it will be hard not to meet. The influence of people who have been our teachers and who we've loved are constantly in our presence, whether they're actually physically with us or not. They constantly support us. And I remember Flint saying once that we are supported throughout space and time by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And I think it's something about remembering that, and remembering, actually bringing it into our bodies and our minds, that we are constantly supported by people who we've loved, and the universe at all times. And what I notice, what I kind of sense about this particular lineage, like all lineages, it has a kind of flavor, so that Suzuki Roshi was Blanche's teacher, and Blanche was Flint's teacher, and Flint is my teacher, and there's a kind of house flavor to this particular strand, this particular lineage of Zen. And I think my sense is that, like with all great teachings, you always retain inside you the essence of that lineage, whilst at the same time you're becoming more you. I think Flint once said, it may be a quote, but when you are you, Buddha is Buddha. So, when Joshi is Joshi, Buddha is Buddha. And one of the things I carry around from Suzuki Roshi sometimes is that he once said, when he was teaching, he said, "This is more true than I can say, and more true than you can hear." And so much of our teaching, our words, can only take us to a point at which we just have to say, this is more true than I can say, and more true than you can hear. My monastic training was as a teacher in secondary schools, and also in the youth offending team. So a number of years ago, I was on bus duty, standing with the head teacher at the school, and the pupils were going to the bus, and I said to him, well, some of these students look so depressed. I'm not sure this, curriculum is helping them in their lives now and in the future. He looked at me and he said, well, come to me tomorrow with an idea. I'm doing the timetable at the moment, and I'll see what I can do for you. And so one thought is, beware what you suggest, because I went to him with an idea, and he said, well, I'm going to timetable you with this group for a significant period of the week. I've identified 17 young people who can miss a number of subjects, 17, 15-year-olds, and I entrust you to do something constructive with them. And he asked them if they wanted to join, and they said yes. So you can imagine, can't you, how that might be, 17, 15-year-olds in a room together. And particularly when I bought a cookery course for them at the local college, which involved hot cookers and lots of sharp implements. I think I can hear you laughing. So we, rather like in our sangha, we spent a lot of time together, and we were working on an edge for a long time, and chaos from time to time moved to harmony, and then back again to chaos, and a lot of repair was needed and a lot of courage. And the things we did were range from the very simple. We would have an afternoon walk by the canal, and in order to try to tolerate each other and to build cooperation and not throw each other in the canal. And we also did bigger projects and worked with a theatre group for young people with particular disabilities. And there were people who in some ways were more vulnerable than this group of young people who were at risk of exclusion and troubled and vulnerable. And at the end of the time, my time with them, which I treasure, I walked into the room on the final day, and there was a table there with cakes they'd made, and somebody gave a little speech, and there were some decorations and cards, and I was quite amazed. I was amazed that they'd gone into town with each other's money and come back, and that they had cooperated to create it. And we had a little party, and it went on too long. 20 minutes would have been fine. An hour was a bit much. But what, beyond everything that they'd learned together, was I think in being with them, I had offered them someone that they could love a little bit, and that they cared enough to put everything that we'd learned into practice and create a lovely event. And it was rather like the session this morning. You know, somebody read something, somebody, you know, everybody did something from what they'd learned from their practice. And I felt a lot of love for them. I loved them. But I think more importantly, it awakens us to the love. It wasn't personal. I remember Flint, one of the first inquiries I ever saw him do in 2008, someone came to him and said how lonely he was, even though he was in a group of people. And Flint talked about not love, he talked about the love, the loneliness, the grief, the pain. It's like, it's there. There was the potential for me and these lovely young people to empty enough to feel the love that is just always there. And in Zen, we talk about you know, transmission, and I wonder if what happens is actually your teacher holds you long enough in a warm, broad embrace in practice while you practice Zazen, in order for you to transmit something to yourself, or in order for you to empty enough to find actually what underlies everything. And the beauty of that moment was not, it wasn't personal. It was, there was love in that place. When we started Nothing Missing in 2012, I said to Flint, well, you know what, Judy and I are starting it up with some people, and should I think about it? And he said, well, think about yourself as holding the torch. You're just a little bit ahead with the torch, and you can kind of walk along and shine the torch a little bit on the way. And that also implies you're walking in the dark. And a teacher recently said, you know, you take a lot more care walking through a dark room than you do in the light. So, I love that image because it felt a little bit like that. You know, we're not in a monastery. We have a teacher who's holding us in this warm embrace, and we are constantly asking the question, what is this? What is this? How do we do this? And inquiring together and finding out what this practice requires of us and offers us. Each year, sometimes twice, Flint would come to the UK, and you know, I take our cats to the vets every year, and you know, I'm entrusted with the cats, and the vets looks at them and strokes them, and obviously it's more profound than that when Flint comes to see us, but there's a kind of way in which we would say we have cared for this practice, these people together, and you know, what do you think? And it's been a wonderful experience for me, and I think for everyone, that we have had to do it this way, with all the support from a distance, from Flint and from Appamada, that deep care of not knowing and having to find out how to move forward together. And what's interesting I find in practice discussion is a lot of time I'm responding to what people say and what people bring, and exploring what Zen isn't, or what I think Zen isn't. So there's a whole kind of experience we've had over a number of years with our sangha to support each other to explore. The other piece from the Just This koan is before Dongshan leaves, Yunyan says to him, "You are now in charge of this great matter. You must be most thoroughgoing." So he's saying, you know, you're going off, you're now a teacher, but, you know, take care step by step. You must be most thoroughgoing in your practice. So it's endless, as Suzuki Roshi said. This is an endless practice. I just want to talk a little bit about the how it's sometimes so easy to miss something if we're looking for meaning in our practice. You know, we listen to wonderful talks from Flint and from others, and I notice that sometimes we can kind of really zone in on the words, and that's fine, but kind of missing the whole piece, you know. And it's something for me again about love. This little piece. When I for example, was in Switzerland and listening to the wonderful talks. What I really kind of opened to was the whole vast teaching that was going on. And in Switzerland, Sophie translates Flint's talks into French, and you have the trees behind, and you have the birds and the mountains, and you have the candles, and it's a whole piece. And sometimes the real teaching for me, because so much of this practice is about relationship, is the way Flint and Sophie work together, and the absolute dedication that Sophie has to Flint, and the fun they have, and you see love. You just see love, and it's so easy to, to kind of focus just on the words and trying to work out what Zen is, and you kind of miss the whole piece. So more and more in my own practice, in my own life, I'm minded not to miss the whole piece, because the teaching is there, and in the teacher-student relationship, love is so central to it. Once I said to Trudy, Flint takes amazing photographs, and I know that he's very technically proficient, but particularly of people. I was struck by his beautiful photographs of people, as I was with Cheska's last night, his student. And that photograph of her father was just amazing. It's like a Rembrandt. And Trudy said, I think Flint sees Buddha everywhere. So I hope to develop the clear seeing of my teacher, and I have enormous gratitude in being offered formal entrustment, but in the meantime in being entrusted. And I have also in recent weeks had the opportunity to feel self-entrusted, and to keep going in as simple and clear a way as my mind will allow me to. I'd just like to read a piece just at the end now, and it refers to what I was talking about Switzerland, and not missing things, really trying to see the whole piece, and it comes from the Book of Serenity. The unique breeze of reality. Can you see it? The unique breeze of reality. Can you hear it? Continuously creation runs her lumen shuttle, weaving the ancient brocade, incorporating the forms of spring. As the woof goes through the warp, the weave is dense and fine. One continuous thread comes from the shuttle. How can this even be spoken of on the same day as false cause and no cause? Thank you very much.
Would you stay there, Josh, for a bit? You can keep your microphone on also if you like. I'm so deeply moved. I don't know actually what else to say. It's such a beautiful talk and touches on the very essence of this practice and our lineage and our relationship, which all we realize is one thing over time. And your offering today, your wholehearted pouring out of this was really lovely. As each talk has been, the series of talks that you've given as students, I sit in awe of with great humility. So I appreciate your ongoing efforts and your everydayness and your friendship and your care. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
If Josh can come back, that would be good. I don't know if that's possible, given our situation here. Just since he's been helping organize, what I wanted to do in these last few moments is, of course, express my profound gratitude for all the work that has been done to make this possible.
Mute myself.
There you are. I hear you. I wanted to echo your gratitude and also extend my own, because I know that preparations for this have been in process for a long time. We were preparing for Sheldon, and the undoing of Sheldon was as much work as being there. Mm. And then the reshaping and the reforming, and my canceling flights and trying to work out everything. Mm. But then in each place, all across England, there are people organizing and preparing and making sure this could be possible. Mm. And then each person who's spoken so deeply from the heart, the talks have been incredible. I can just step back and let all of you do this. I think it's actually quite a nice way to teach, to have these voices of wisdom and compassion come along. And so instead of reading this old stories of teachers and students, we enact them together. It's quite beautiful. So I just wanted to thank everyone.
I think, you know, with the retreats not happening, as you say, we fail and we go deeper. And
yes,
we've had to learn very quickly, with enormous help from Appamada and from Suzanne in Madison and from you, and we have enormous gratitude and joy that we made it happen for so many people.
Yeah, we help each other along. Without Kim and Jessica, I don't think we could have pulled it off. You know, their support is amazing, and all the other background people at Appamada with Peg, because she couldn't come, the way she supported things. Cassie doing recordings and working with the YouTube channel, and the Madison Sangha doing this ahead, and on we've gone, and so we'll continue together.
Yes,
but I think. Yeah. I'm immensely grateful. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to continue to be part of the Dharma unrolling widely in the UK. Well,
we have such gratitude for all you offer, Flint, and we look forward to our online connections deepening at this time. And I also want to just remind USA and worldwide people to please visit the Appamada website if you'd like to contribute for this retreat.
We appreciate your support. And so I send my warmest aloha from the Hawaiian Islands to everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.